I'd like now to bring up the prime sponsor of this bill, Representative Paulette. Please tell us about your bill.
Thank you, Chair Valdez and members of the State Government Tribal Affairs Committee. Thank you for this opportunity and this hearing. I really believe that the name of this bill says everything that we want to say about this and our values in adopting this bill. It is proposed to be referred to as the Nothing About Us Without Us Act. And for too long, we've assumed that persons with disabilities, whether it is physical disabilities or it is developmental disabilities, are unable to participate and to speak on their own behalf as we develop policies and discuss how policy changes will affect their lives. And by sitting together with folks with disabilities, we learn and we grow and we recognize that indeed they have their own perspective from their life's experiences about how our proposals will impact them. Thus, when we are developing a new advisory committee or continuing advisory boards, task forces that are making recommendations that affect the lives of persons with disabilities, we should ensure that the persons who are impacted, the persons with the experience, are there to share their experience and educate us and show us what can indeed be done. And that's what this simple message is. Nothing about us without us. And I urge its adoption. I'll be glad to answer any questions. Staff has briefed the details very well and look forward to working with committee members.
Good morning, Chair Valdez and members of the committee, and also Representative Paulette. For the record, my name is Samantha Fogg. I am disabled. I am a constituent of the 46th, and I am here today representing Seattle Council, PTSA, in strong support of this bill. One of our top legislative priorities is accessibility and inclusion for disabled students and their parents, and we see the importance of including disabled people on task forces, on policy-making committees as being critical for supporting our families and our students. I want to say thank you for prioritizing this bill. Having it on the agenda today tells me that you understand how critically important this is to all Washingtonians, not just the 1 in 5 of us who are disabled. And we ask that you move this forward quickly. The disability community is often invisible to non-disabled people, and yet ours is the only minority group that you can join at any time. I myself have been non-disabled, disabled for 15 years, non-disabled for 11 years, and now am disabled again. We expect that at some point this bill will have a beneficial impact on every one of our families, whether or not they currently have personal experience with disability. My own experience with disability has taught me the critical importance of policy and of being a part of the conversation as early as possible. A lot of people have good intentions when it comes to disabled people, but it is we, the disabled people who are impacted, that are experts both in the problems we face and in the solutions that work for us. As a person with a mobility disability, it is so easy to silence me. Just hold the meeting in one of the many places with stairs, and I have direct experience with things being made inaccessible to prevent my participation. I want to thank you again. Nothing about us without us is incredibly important, and I ask that you pass this bill on behalf of Seattle Council, PTSA. Thank you.
My name is Diana Stadden. I'm with the ARC of Washington State, the Advocacy and Policy Specialist there. We have a group that we work with and have for many years, at least 20 years that I know of, Self-Advocates in Leadership. And that group is a number of self-advocates who have developmental disabilities, who are interested in legislative issues and are active in making things happen. And this bill was their idea a few years ago. there was a problem with a work group that they weren't allowed to be on, but their voices really needed to be part of. And so we at the ARC have always encouraged self-advocates to speak up and make their voices heard. And especially on legislative committees, this is so important. Like the last speaker said, we all experience disabilities at some point in our lives. I had physical disabilities that now have me in a wheelchair, but I have a vocal voice and I can speak up for myself. And it's often difficult for people with developmental disabilities to do that, but they should be offered the opportunity. And often they are not. They're just excluded because their voice isn't loud enough, like some of the rest of us. So I really appreciate Representative Paulette bringing this bill forward and making sure that all of those voices are heard, because they're so important. They have so much to say. So many of my friends are self-advocates, and they teach me all the time. I have a son who is autistic, an adult son. I have an adult daughter with mental health disorders. They teach me things every day too. We can all learn from the voices that are different than ours. And so I appreciate you moving this bill along. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you, Chair Valdez and members of the committee. For the record, I'm Daria Farivar, Public Policy Director at Disability Rights Washington, and we are so excited to be here in support of 1802. A big thank you to Representative Paulette for sponsoring this legislation, and a big thank you to Representative Valdez and Dolan for co-sponsoring it. And finally, a huge thank you to Ivanova Smith for leading the way and being a strong advocate to push this legislation forward. It's been a joy to work with all of you. The Nothing About Us Without Us Act is smart policy, because when we include people with direct lived experience in the conversation, we create better policy. We create more effective systems and have a higher chance of doing it right the first time through. Oftentimes, the voices of allies and advocates are used to substitute the voices of people with disabilities themselves. This bill attempts to put an end to that. People with disabilities are the experts in their own lives and should be treated that way. Their experiences, thoughts, and opinions are valuable. Not only is it necessary for folks with disabilities to be at the table, but the table must also be accessible. 1802 also attempts to make sure individuals are meaningfully engaged in the decision-making process by having state agencies work with the community to identify barriers and provide the legislature with best practices, resources, and recommendations. The bill says it well. Access is an equity issue, and by addressing barriers to participation for people with disabilities, the greater public will also benefit. We ask you to commit to creating an equitable legislative process that allows all people to speak their minds and participate in decisions that directly impact their lives. Thank you for hearing 1802. Please pass this quickly. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Ivanova Smith, and I represent Self Advocates and Leadership, SAIL, and I am of the 29th Legislative District. I am very passionate about this bill and wanted full support, and I thank the legislators that are here today that have been have sponsored and co-sponsored this bill. We want to make sure that the voices of people with lived experience with disabilities make their voices heard, make their views and how they want their services to be done, and how policy for the services ought to be done. Historically, people with disabilities have not been allowed at the table. We've been denied access at the table, and it actually caused harmful policy. In the past, we've known that there were policies that were put in place that have harmed disabled people. And if we had people with disabilities first had experience there, we may have been able to avoid those harmful policies. And so now we want to change that and make it so that people with lived experience are able to make our needs known and make it known how to make it so that the policies support us and help us and not hinder us. And a quote I like to use is, you will finally get to hear it from the horse's mouth. You'll get to hear from people directly how these policies affect them. And so that is why I really ask you to support the Nothing About Us Without Us bill and please have it passed this committee. Thank you very much.
My name is Jessica Renner. I live in the 33rd Legislative District. I am the mobilization manager of Self Advocates and Leadership SAIL. I am here this morning testifying pro on HB 1802. I feel it's extremely important that self-advocates have a voice and be at the table on task forces, work groups, commissions and committees. Advocates need to use their own voices instead of letting other people make decisions on their behalf. Please pass the Nothing About Us Without Us bill. Thank you.
I am 23. I do have a disability myself. I am a member of the Self-Advocates and Leadership, known as SAIL, and the People's Republic of Washington, now representing the National Council of Self-Advocates. I'm speaking on this bill because I strongly support this bill a lot because I do have lived experience not being on task forces or being on a board or serve on a committee. The reason why is because I want to make an impact and have my voice to be heard. And the reason why I want my voice to be heard is because I want to have, because it's people with disabilities do have an impact and we should be heard. Because policies do impact us a lot, and I want to have that pointed out. And I am a pro on this bill as well, and I want to see this pass immediately because this is my lived experience. And decisions impact our lives a lot, and I want to say that because I do have lived experience and I want it passed. And I do thank Paulette for sponsoring this bill, and I do thank all the co-sponsors.
Thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak on the development of this Bill 1802. I am a person with disability that have a I'm sorry. I am very sorry.
You're doing just fine. You're doing just good.
I am a person with disability that grew up in a community that didn't have a voice into what I say about my own community. I faced a lot of things, and I found it by people with disability are very oppressed in many ways. Just the last work group, they didn't give up our own input about what we want or what we do. The decisions that you made for people with disability are just in our right. We should have a right to be able to make our own choices and make our own decisions. So I am in favor of 1802 to pass. Thank you. And I'm very sorry. I got a very bad in speaking. So.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members. My name is Eric Mathis, and I live in the 34th Legislative District. I am testifying in support of House Bill 1802, Nothing About Us Without Us, on behalf of People First of Washington. This bill requires more than just one person with a disability must be represented in work groups that affect people with disabilities. If there was just one person, it would be difficult to speak up alone. Also, people with disabilities have a variety of beliefs, so it makes sense to have several people with different points of view. I support in having the Office of Equity as one of the agencies involved in selecting members. This will ensure that it will not just be white people with disabilities on work groups. The inclusion of people with disabilities is very important to the legislature doing their work. One, any group established by the legislature whose activities are related to persons with disability will be required to have at least 3 members with direct lived experience related to the issues being addressed. 2, the Governor's Committee on Disability Issues and Employment, the Developmental Disability Council, and the Office of Equity must identify barriers to access and meaningful participation, identify accommodations and changes to stakeholders' engagement, consider the ADA universal design, ensure relevant training or guidance is available for legislators. 3, training materials and guidance provide the legislature must describe the membership requirements, strongly encourage the inclusion of people with disabilities and included type of accommodations available. The bill came from the developmental disability community, but the bill will all people with disabilities who come from culturally, leniency, geography, and systematically diverse backgrounds. And thank you for your time, and please pull this bill. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Senator Valdez, and thank you to the whole, to the entire committee here present. I also want to thank Rep. Paulette for your awesome support of this bill. I want to give a special thank you to Ivanova Smith, too, and the other self-advocates that created this bill and that are here speaking today. My name is Moses Perez. I am serving currently at Open Doors for Multicultural Families in Kent, Washington. We serve over 2,000 families and individuals that come from linguistically and culturally diverse backgrounds. We are very heavy on family advocacy. Our organization started in Ginger Kwan's living room approximately about 12 years ago. And even an advocacy organization like ourselves that are very heavily focused on family advocacy, and that's where we began. We are seeing that many of the families that we serve and the individuals with developmental and intellectual disabilities are aging. And they're growing not only in size, but in mentality and age, just like any of us do. And because of that, many of our self-advocates here at Open Doors have really encouraged Open Doors to continue to invest and create programs that do exactly what this bill is saying, giving self-advocates the opportunity to decide and design a society in which they can thrive, including in how our organization services them and their families. In Washington State, there's a lot of talk about diversity, inclusion, and social justice. I think it would be unheard of to have this state make large decisions about the Latino race and not have Latinos at the table. I think the same principle should be applied to self-advocacy and those that have these disabilities, that they would be at the table as well. And I just want to thank each one of you again, and thank you to all the self-advocates for holding us accountable as an American society that is inclusive, that does promote diversity and social justice. Thank you very much, Representative Valdez.
Good morning, Madam Chair, and thank you for sponsoring 1802. Without this bill, people with disabilities will not be invited to serve as well. I like this bill. Let's pass it, and thank you.
Hi, my name is Anthony Nash, and I am a person with a disability. I live in Tri-Cities, member of the 8th Legislative District, and I am in support of House Bill 1802, and I have been a part of it since it's been together, and we've tried to do everything we can to make this bill equitable, diverse, and everything. And we have as many people from different cultures who are a part of it. And we believe that everyone has an equal right, an equal voice to be a part of the community, to live the American dream. And we believe this bill can help with that, because I myself serve on local, state, national, and international work groups for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And we do everything we can to make things as diverse as possible. And the Nothing About Us Without Us would help people with IDD be part, like person-centered planning, that would allow an individual to be a part of a person-centered plan, something for them to, say, this is what I would like. And then they would have people help them making those decisions. And I would really like to see House Bill 1802 get passed. Thank you.
I'm in the 38th Legislative District, and I am been on this HB 1802 bill, and I advocate for people strongly with disabilities, and that I thank you for Paulette and all Nothing About Us bill. We've been working very hard, and thank you for letting me testify. And I would like to see the bill HB 1802 passed. Thank you so much for letting me testify.